Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Tina, and I'll be your host for the next 45 minutes, bringing you the second part of a new report designer session where we'll continue exploring sections and groups on report files in Sage 50 accounts. This follows on from the Introduction to Sections and Groups session where I explained the basics. So if you didn't manage to attend that and would like to know more, the session was recorded and can be accessed via the Sage Help Centre. Some housekeeping before we get going. You will be automatically muted by GoToWebinar, which just means you can't physically speak to us during the session. You can ask us questions though, and these can be submitted via the questions panel on the right-hand side. Today I have Abby, Jackie, Marie and Michael joining me to answer your questions. While we will try and answer them all, if for any reason your question isn't answered today, please refer to the Sage Help Centre or contact our support team for further help. Today's slides are available for you to download in the handouts area, and the session content will also be shared to Sage City. So watch out for an email around an hour or two after today's session that will provide you with the relevant links. So let's look at what we'll be covering today. I'll start by doing a quick recap of what was covered in the first session and then demonstrate how to add multiple groups to a report. I'll then talk about how you can achieve subtotals on a report and how you can use the page break feature to separate groups of data onto different pages. And finally, I'll explain where you can get further support. So a quick reminder of the benefits of adding groups to reports. A group is a means of dividing a list of report data by something that's shared in common. So for example, it could be a list of customers grouped by department, a list of transactions grouped by supplier account reference or supplier account name, or a list of products grouped by location. There's loads of different examples. So the benefits a group gives you is that it provides structure to a report, which often makes the data easier to interpret. Your report data is automatically sorted by any groups added to the report, and this can be in either ascending or descending order. The first two benefits were the focus of session 1. Today, we're going to look at the next 3 benefits. So you can add multiple groups to a report if it makes sense to do so. The 2 main reasons for adding groups are firstly to provide structure to the report, and secondly, the ability to add subtotals for each group of data when there are value fields on the report. You can also add page breaks to grouped reports, so the report data for each group shows on a separate page. And there's lots more that we will explore in a future session. In the last session, we explored reports without groups and how to add a single group to a report. Let's take a look at an existing report with multiple groups so I can explain how the report is structured before I show you how to create one. So this slide is the report design of the Agent's Commission report from Customer Reports. And this report has 2 groups applied. As we saw in the previous session, the report is split into several sections. The page header section contents will appear once per page of the report. The report header and footer section contents will appear once per report at the top and bottom of the report. The first group on the report is for the Analysis 1 field. This is one of the 3 custom fields available in the Defaults tab of the customer record. Any content in a group header and footer will appear once at the start and the end of each group of data. So in this example, Analysis 1. The second group on the report is for the customer's account reference field. So these sections work in the same way as the first group, with the content appearing at the start and end of each group, but this time it's for the customer account reference. And finally, the details section is where the main report data is held, and the content in this section appears once per line of data returned on the report. So let's go into Sage 50 accounts to see how this looks when previewed. So I'll just change my screens. And hopefully now you should be able to see my Sage 50 account software. Okay, so I'm going to select customers. There, I'm going to go to reports. I'm going to open the agent's commission reports folder. And then I'm just going to preview the first report, agent's commission report. And I'm just going to pop a date range in there. And then click OK. I'm just going to zoom in a bit on the report data there. Okay, so the group 1 data for the analysis code 1 appears first. So here I can see I've got the text box that says agent, and then the data held in the analysis 1 field, which in this example is Abby. We can then see the data for group 2 underneath, with the customer data for the first customer in the group. So this is Fred Bryant, so we can see I've got the account reference, BRI001, and then the account name for Fred Bryant. I also have the headings for the main data in the group below. So underneath the 4 transactions we can see for Fred Bryant, we have subtotals for each of these transactions. So now the format is repeated for any other customers, so for customers 2 and 3. So I've got my second customer is Stephen Stevenson. So there's the account details, the headings, the actual data, and then the subtotals. And then the same for customer 3, Edward Stewart, the data and the subtotals. Finally, I get the agent totals at the bottom. So that's at the end of group 1 on analysis code. So if I go down to the second page on the report, I can now see a new agent's details. So I can see I've changed agent, and rather than Abby, I'm now on Jackie, and there's Jackie's customers there. And if I scroll down to page 3, I'm on a new agent again. There's Michael, and then his customers there. So there is a page break applied to this report, which ensures each agent's data starts on a new page. And I'll be showing you how to do that a little bit later. So finally, if I go right to the very end of the report, underneath the last subtotal for the last agent on the report, I can see the report totals. So let's amend an existing report and add multiple groups to it so you can see how the process works. So I'm going to close the preview screen and I'll get back to the reports list. I'm going to stick with customer reports, but this time I'm going to open the daybooks reports folder. And I'm going to create a new report based on the daybooks customer invoices detailed report. I'll just preview this first. Just zoom in a bit. So within the preview, we can see that this is currently just a list of customer invoice transactions, because all we can see are transaction types of SI on the report. So at the moment, it's not really giving us any real insight into the data shown. So I'm just going to click Edit at the top of the screen to take me into Report Designer. Now, what I want to do is to make this report more meaningful. I'd like to be able to see the total value of invoices raised for each department in my data. And within each department, I'd also like to see the total value of invoices for each customer. So the first thing I need to do is to save this existing report as a new file. So from the report menu at the top, I'm going to select Report Properties to change the name of the report. So I'm just going to add on to the end of it by department and customer, and then I'm going to click OK to confirm that change. Now I'm going to go to the File menu at the top left, and then I'm going to click Save As. The report location will default to My Customer Reports. I'm happy to leave the file name as copy of the original. So I'm just going to click on Save, and I'll see that the new description and file name now show at the top left. Now, before adding a group to a report, I'd recommend you have a look at the existing data fields to see if the field you want to group by is already on the report. So this is going to help you identify which table and data field you need. So I want my first group to be by department. So I'm going to look for any department information on the report. So I can see a column for department number. I've got DEPT, which indicates it's for department. If I hover over the data field on the report, it tells me that it's the department number field from the audit split table being used. So I'll just hover over that again, just to see if you can see that. So that's the data field I'm going to add my group on. So to add a group to a report, from the Sections menu, select Add Section, and then Group Header and Footer. So I know I want to add the group for Audit Split Department Number, which I can get access to from the Fields panel at the bottom right. So I'm just going to close the Audit Header table, and then I'm going to expand the Audit Split table and look for the Department Number field in here. Now, if I press the letter D on the keyboard, it takes me to the field starting with the letter D, and I can just scroll down from there. So once I've found the data field for department number, I'm just going to double click on it, and it will add it to the window on the left. And then I'm just going to click on OK. And the result of this is that a new header and footer section have been added to the report, either side of the details section. So I have the audit split department number header and the audit split department number footer. So I'll just save my changes, and then I'm going to preview the report. And again, I'll just zoom in a little bit. So we can see the transaction list has now been grouped into departments, and it's sorting in department number order, because I can see the transactions for department 0 first. And then if I scroll down, I see the transactions for department 1 and so on. So we can already see the structure of the report has already improved. So let's go back to add the second group for customer account reference and see what happens there. So I'm just going to go back into Designer. So again, I'm going to use the same tactic as before and see if I can find any customer data fields on the report. So I do have an account ref column, and if I hover over the variable, it says it's using the audit split account reference. So I'm going to add my second group on that. So this is a bit of recap for you. So for another group, we're going to go back into Sections, select Add Section, and then again, select Group Header and Footer. And again, I know that I want to add the group for Audit Split Account Ref, but rather than adding via the Fields panel this time, I'm going to show you a different way, and then you can decide which you prefer going forward. So this time, I'm just going to click my mouse into the main window, and I'm going to start typing the word audit. So you can see the drop-down appears automatically. I can now scroll down and select Audit Split. If I now press the full stop on the keyboard, a new drop-down appears with a list of data fields, and I can select Account Ref from there. So that's exactly the same result as adding the field from the Fields panel at the bottom right. So once I've done that, I can just click on OK, and I get the same result as the first group. I get a new header and footer section appearing either side of the details section. So this time I can see I've got an audit split account ref header and an audit split account ref footer. So again, I'm just going to save my changes at the top left and preview the report. Again, I'll just zoom in. So we can see that this time the transactions in Department 0 have really been separated out, as there's only one customer with more than one transaction in this department. So if I just scroll down a bit, there's the customer, MIL001. They have 2 transactions, one for 100 and one for 500. If I scroll further down the report to look for Department 1, which I can see there, I can see all transactions for customer A1D001 have been grouped together. If I keep on scrolling, there's all of the transactions for ABS001 and BBS001. So they're all being grouped together now by customer account reference. So by adding this second group, I've actually achieved what I wanted. So I need to tidy the report up a bit and move some things around. So I'm going to go back into Report Designer to make these changes. So at the moment, my group header sections are empty. So while the groups are giving me the structure I need on the report, I still need to add some useful information into the headers to make the report data meaningful. So starting with the department number header, I'm going to move the department title from the page header, and I'm going to move that into the department number header. I'm also going to move the department data field from the details section into the department number header just to the right of the text box. So when I preview this report now, I should see that the information appears now once at the start of each new department. So there's the Department 0 title. And if I scroll down a bit, I can then see it just appears again at the start of Department 1. So I'm going to do the same with the customer's account reference. So I'll go back into Designer, focusing this time on the account ref header. I'm going to pick the title for account ref and move it from the page header into the account ref header. And I'll do the same with the account ref data field. I'll move that from the details section and put that in the account ref header as well. So exactly the same as I did for these 2 objects in the department number header. So when I preview this now, what I'm going to see is the customer's account reference at the start of each new set of customer transactions. So there's my department information, and there's my customer information for A1D001, and there's my customer information for BRO001, and so on. If I scroll down to the start of the transactions in department number 1, I can see any titles for the data fields underneath the customer, and that's because they're currently sitting in a page header section. So remember, the content of the page header section only appears once at the top of each page. So if I want the titles for the data to appear for each customer, I also need to move these into the account ref header section. So if I go back into Designer, there's not actually much room in the account ref header at the moment to actually accommodate these titles. But what I can do is to make this section a bit bigger. So if I hover my mouse over the bottom of the account ref header section, I can actually click and drag the section down a little bit, and you can see I'm creating a bit more space there. So I can make that a lot bigger, and I can make it a lot smaller, but I'm just going to make it just that little bit bigger. So now what I can do is to select the titles in the page header section, and then I'm just going to use my arrow keys on the keyboard to move these down so they're sitting just underneath the account reference objects, just above the details section. So I'm just going to save my changes again. And then when I preview now, I should see that the titles for the main report data appear each time a customer account changes. So there's my customer account 1, there's my titles, and then I've got my 1 bit of data underneath. And there's account 2, the titles, and the data. So that's the group header sections covered. Let's move on now to the group footers. So these are currently also empty. So if I just have a look back in the design, I've got my account ref footer that's empty and also my department number footer that's also empty. So before I start focusing on these, I'm just going to pop back to the slides before I demonstrate how to add totals. Okay, so this slide for group footers. Any value fields added to group footer sections. So to give you an example, net amounts, VAT amounts or gross amounts, etc., will provide a subtotal for the group the data fields were added to. So for example, adding value fields to a department number footer will give you subtotals per department. If you add them to an account ref footer, you'll get subtotals per customer. Now, there are two main considerations when you're adding totals to a report that you must check to ensure the totals calculate correctly. The function property of the data fields must be set to sum, and the reset section property must be set to the section the data fields are in. And I'll demonstrate this for you now. So I'll just go back to the demo. Okay, so we should be back in Report Designer now. So I'm going to start off by looking at the properties for the net amount data field, which is sitting in the details section. So this field here isn't a total. It just shows the net amount for each transaction on the report. So if I click on the net amount and then open the properties pane from the right-hand side, I'm just going to pin that there for the time being. Make that a little bit bigger there. The function property is currently set to none. And the reset section property is set to details, which is the section that the data field is in. So let's look at the net amount in the report footer section just to see how that's different. Now this is a total. So if I click on that, this time we can see the function of the property is set to sum, and then the reset section is set to report footer. And this is how the totals on the report display correctly. So how do I get subtotals on the report? With this, you have two options. You can either manually add each data field directly into the relevant footer section and then position it correctly. So the downside of that is if you have several data fields to add to multiple sections, it will be more time consuming. Your other option is that you can copy and paste existing total fields and then move them into the correct section. So this is quicker and you can copy and paste multiple fields in one go. And I'll show you this method now. So in my report footer, I've got a text box for totals, and then I've got a net amount, a tax amount, and a gross amount data field. So I'm just going to click and drag a box around those four objects. And then what I'm going to do is to right click on one of them, and then I can select copy from the menu. Or I could use the Control and C shortcut. If I now right click again, I can select paste, or I could use Control and V instead. So I'm just going to select that, and we can see that the totals have actually just been pasted underneath. I can now move these totals up into the department number footer section. So I'm just going to click and drag these and then just make sure that they're lined up with the totals below. Now, before I preview, I just want to check that the properties are correct. So I'm just going to check them one at a time. So if I click on net amount, I can see that the function is set correctly to sum. And I also need to check that the reset section is the section that the data field is sitting in, which it is. It's the audit split department number. If I check the tax amount, function is sum, reset section is correct, and I'll just do the same for the gross. Function of sum, reset section is correct. So I'm confident that these totals are actually going to work. Now, what I can do is I can repeat the paste part of the process just by repeating the right click and then paste, And I can see that the data fields are just pasted there again. So this time I'm just going to move these up into the account ref footer. And again, I'm just going to check the properties, net amount, function of sum, reset section is set to audit split account ref footer, which is exactly what I wanted to do. And then the tax amount is the same, and also the gross amount is the same. So I'm just going to save that and then preview. Zoom in a little bit, and I'm just going to scroll down to the first account that has 2 transactions, which I think was MIL001. So there's the 2 transactions. One's for 100, one's for 500, and there we can see the subtotal is adding correctly at 600. If I keep scrolling down to the end of the first department, I can see I've got subtotals for the department as well before I move on to department 1. So these subtotals will be correct. If you did want to check, you're basically going to need to get your calculator out. Now at the moment in the preview, I can see that the data for department 1 starts immediately as soon as the data for department 0 ends. So this is currently on page 2 of the report. Now I can force each department to start on a brand new page by applying a page break on the department. So I'll go back into Report Designer to show you how to do this. Now page breaks can be applied to either a group header section or a group footer section. So both properties work in exactly the same way. So you just have to pick a section and then apply the page break to it. So I'm just going to select the department number header section. And in the properties pane on the right hand side, there's a property there called page break before. It's currently set to false. So I'm just going to change that over to true. So if I had selected the department number footer instead, the property instead is called page break after. Okay, so that's the only difference. And be aware, you only need to apply the page break to either one of these sections. You don't have to do them to both. So I'm just going to save my changes and then I'll preview again. And we can see the department 1 data, if I just scroll down a bit. Department 1 now starts at the top of page 3 rather than at the end of page 2. So if you had 10 departments, for example, every department's transactions would start on a new page. I've just got one last thing to do before my report's done. So if I go back into Report Designer, I can see at the moment I've got one empty section left, this section number 3, which is the page header. Empty sections just take up room on the page, so they can actually be hidden if they're not in use. So I'm just going to select my empty page header. I'm going to go into Properties, and I'm just going to change the visible property from true to false, and then the section disappears from the design. I'm now going to save my changes, and then I'll close Report Designer. So my new report is going to appear in the My Customer Reports folder, as that was the default location when I saved it. Now I can mark it as a favorite if I want by just clicking on the star to the left of it, so it appears in my favorites folder. But if not, I can just run this report to see a list of my customer invoices by department and customer. Okay, so let's go back to the slides so I can do a bit of recap. So this is how the daybook looked before and after the amendments. So adding multiple groups to the report has given us more meaningful data. So the whole report design thing is all about practice. So you can always rewatch this session if you need to, but I've also put extra slides into your slide deck, so you've got those for reference as well. So to summarise what I've shown you today, each time a group is added to a report, 2 new sections are added to the report design: a group header and a group footer for the data field the group was added for. So in the examples today, I added one for audit split department number and audit split account ref. The objects relating to that group should either be moved into the relevant header section, or you could add them into the section from scratch by using your add text or add data field options. So this would be to explain what the group is. So in the demonstration today, I moved the department information from the page header and details sections into the department number header, and then I did the same with the customer's account reference and moved that into the account ref header. Any titles for the main report data should sit in the last group header if you've got multiple groups on the report. The last group header is always the section immediately above the details section. So during the demonstration, I moved the titles into the second group, which was the account ref header. That was the one just above the details section. To get subtotals for each group, add value data fields into the group footer sections. So for example, the net, tax and gross amounts. And you must always check the properties for the fields should always be set to sum in the function property, and in the reset section property, it should always be set to the section the data fields are in. This will ensure that your totals calculate correctly. And finally, we saw how page breaks can be assigned to either a group header or a group footer to force the start of a new group of data onto a new page on the report. If you need further support, I've also added some links to the relevant areas of the Sage Help Centre. There are links to articles on adding groups, totals, and how to change group properties. There's also the link to my favourite tables and variables article if you need to find out which data field you need to group on. And finally, our report design service is available if you'd rather we designed a report for you. So this week we have another new webinar for you. Jackie's hosting a session on Brexit tax codes, so please sign up for this if this applies to you. Now we're coming towards the close of our webinars for December. We do have another credit control session, along with one for year end for next week. And then we'll be back in January with the VAT return and another new session on global changes. So if you have any suggestions for new webinar topics, please add these to the exit survey when you leave. So that brings us to the end of today's session. I hope you found it useful. I'm going to stay online for the next few minutes if you're waiting for an answer to a question. If you've got what you need though, you can absolutely leave the session. Thanks for joining me today. And if you've got any comments or suggestions for improvement, please take a minute to feed these back when you complete the exit survey, and I'll take a look at these for future sessions. Watch out for an email from us in around an hour or two with links to today's content, so you can just revisit this if you need to. So I'm just going to pop myself on mute just to check the questions. I'll be back soon. Hi there, I'm back briefly just to cover a question that Margaret has put forward. So I demonstrated how to hide the page header section a bit earlier, and Margaret's asking, can you actually unhide sections so you can actually bring them back? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. So for this, what I'd always recommend is, you've got your Report Explorer and your Properties panel at the right-hand side. I'd always recommend you pin these so you can actually see them at the right-hand side. It'll just make it a little bit easier for you. So the Report Explorer shows you every single section that's actually on the report in the background, but this will not always match exactly to what's shown on the preview. And that's because the sections can be hidden basically. So in the demo, I hid, I think, what was the third page header. So we can see I've got page header here. So if I select this within Report Explorer, the Properties panel changes at the top, and all I need to basically make a section visible again is to just click on the visible property and change that from false to true. And there you see that then comes back to the report design. So you can see you can hide sections and you can also bring them back. But bringing them back, basically, I would say to you to pin your Report Explorer and your Properties panel at the right-hand side, just to make your life a bit easier. Bear with me a sec. Schoolgirl error, people. I'm sorry, I forgot to show you my my screen. So bear with me. I'll run through that again. I'm just going to re-hide that. Right, let's try that again. Okay, so I've got the Report Explorer panel pinned at the right-hand side and also properties. Okay, so there's the page header that was hidden earlier on. I can see the properties and I just need to change that from visible false to visible true, and there the section comes back. So second time lucky for that one. Apologies for that. Okay, I think everybody is up to date now with the questions. So I'd just like to thank you all for attending today. And I'd just like to thank Abby, Jackie, Marie and Michael for your help in questions. And I look forward to seeing you all on another session very soon. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye for now.